Welcome to our show. I'm Velden-Duffey, and with me I have Est-Marie McCallaghan, one of our brilliant young attorneys, and we are going to discuss the social media headline that's absolutely everywhere now, the Depp versus Heard matter. I saw last night Johnny Depp won the trial. So correct me if I'm wrong here with the facts, Est-Marie. What happened was he sued Amber for 50 million in damages because she referred to him in an article of where she referred to herself as well as a domestic abuse survivor. And he argued that the public deduced from her wording that he is the domestic abuser in that relationship. She then countersued him for 100 million because of a statement that his attorney made, that his attorney of that at that stage made, indicating that she is basically lying. So, Est-Marie, I think what everybody is wondering is how would this have played out in South Africa?
That's an interesting question, Velden, because needless to say, our South African law on defamation is vastly different from the US law of defamation. So in South Africa, defamation is a recognized ground for which you can institute a claim, but the elements that we have to prove here is vastly different from how it would work in the US.
Okay, so what would he have to prove in South Africa?
In South Africa, we need to prove that the statement that was made was wrongful. It was made with an intent to damage someone else's reputation or good name in society, and that statement must have been published to at least one other person.
Okay, and so publish, what do you mean with that? So if I put something on social media, would that qualify as publish?
Publish can take on many different forms. It can be a written statement, it can be a verbal statement, it can even be body language or hand gestures that you're making about someone, towards someone. Written statements would, of course, also include social media statements and even WhatsApp messages that's being forwarded to other people.
So we should all be a bit more careful about that share button on Facebook.
Yes. Importantly, speaking of sharing, in order for you to be held liable for defamation, you do not have to be the author of that statement that is being published. Resharing someone else's defamatory statement or forwarding that WhatsApp message about someone could also land you in trouble.
That is quite interesting. And tell me now, because we get this quite often as well, where people say, but he is telling everybody that I did this and this and this. Would that also qualify for defamation?
Yes, if you can prove that the he that you're talking about is actually spreading defamatory statements about you.
Okay. And tell me, something that I read along the headlines as well was that previously he instituted action against Heard in the UK, if I'm correct, but he wasn't successful there.
Yes, an important distinction between the UK and the US trial is in the UK, his action was actually not against Amber Heard, but it was against a newspaper who, based on Amber Heard's statements, referred to Johnny Depp as a wife beater. So the action in the UK was actually against a newspaper.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, a very important distinction, aside from the fact that what he needs to prove for defamation is different between the two countries. In the UK, the action was before one single judge that listened to the evidence, applied the law, and made a decision. In the US, as we all know, this was publicized. There was live video feeds in the courtroom, and the jury had to decide whether the two parties, Depp and Heard, defamed each other, which is different, obviously, from a judge having to decide.
Okay, so that's a popular court of public opinion that everybody refers to, and I think they played that quite well as well,
Yes.
with various manipulative social media posts and the whole saga surrounding that. I think I also read that her attorneys, Amber's attorney, said that she was definitely influenced by the social media storm happening around
and
that.
she also said that the jury was definitely influenced, because even though the jury was not allowed to do what they kept saying, outside research, which would also refer to all the social media posts, I guess one can assume that you're human. This trial ran for 6 or 7 weeks with a break in between. Of course, some of those people would go onto social media in the evening, or they would discuss the case maybe with friends and family. They're not allowed to, and we cannot say for certain that they did.
At the end
But
of the
they are
day.
human, and that is what Amber Heard's attorney says, because in the court of public opinion on social media, Amber was trashed, if we can put it that way. There was hashtags all over justice for Johnny, and there was a lot of videos made about the evidence in the trial and what both of them said and so on. And importantly as well, the social media posts would typically compare what Amber was saying in this case during a testimony
I saw that.
with other things she said in the past, whether in social media or on interviews or in the UK trial, because they both testified there as well, and then compared
Movie scenes.
yes, and then compared it. So yes, Amber Heard's attorneys did say in an interview afterwards that it's possible that the jury could have been influenced by the whole social media trial
Yeah,
that played out.
I think to a large extent, Johnny's also a likable person. So the public, they like him. They like the whole Pirates of the Caribbean
Yes.
Johnny. And I think that everybody associates to some degree with that. And I don't think they, or that Amber's attorneys really went out of their way, or at least not her attorneys, but her PR team went out of their way to paint a different picture of her.
Yes. And remember, a lot of people grew up with Johnny Depp and the films that he made, and he made some really, really good movies for old and young to enjoy. Whereas with Amber Heard, she was just sort of at the start of her career. She hasn't really made a name for herself to such an extent that Johnny Depp did in the past. So a lot of people tend to favor Johnny Depp perhaps because they sort of grew up with all the amazing movies that he's made in the past.
And I think something that they also did right there was associated to get people to associate with him, the public as well as the jury, perhaps. I don't know. We'll never know that part. Is to paint the whole picture of, yes, I did abuse drugs. Yes, I do drink too much. I do crazy stuff.
Yes,
because I'm human. Nobody has an issue with that. I think at some stage you mentioned that, yes, I did carry some drugs with me, but that was not the issue.
Yes.
Nobody had an issue with me using drugs.
He was honest, even if it was damaging to himself.
Yes. And also he exposed himself a lot during the trial, which often happens in these kind of things. I think many people want, and I think that's what she also wanted to do, is keep this facade of, I'm good, I am better than perfect. Yes, perfect. Whereas he said, I'm not. I have all of these traumatic incidents from my past. But yes, that just goes to show how that would actually influence a jury at the end of the day. So in South Africa, that's a bit different because we don't use the jury system. Tell us a bit more about that. How would it have taken place in South Africa?
In South Africa, well, first of all, it's highly unlikely that the trial would have been broadcast live in South Africa.
Definitely.
Unless, of course, there was special permission for that and it was a high-profile case. But
like the Oscar Pistorius matter, where they said that would be in the interest of justice to showcase that.
Yes, because justice must be seen to be done. But for normal people like you and me, if we were in a trial in South Africa, this does not get publicized live or broadcast live. That's the first distinction. So they would not be outside influences.
Or limited outside influence, at least.
And the second thing is we don't have a jury system in South Africa. We have one judge, sometimes multiple, but in general, one judge that listens to the case, evaluates the evidence, applies the law, and there can be different points to argue the law for both sides, and then makes a decision regarding which witness was found to be credible and which not, and how the law can be applied to those facts. So it would be vastly different in South Africa.
Okay. I'm also curious, how would Amber have been able to defend herself in South Africa? What would her defense to Johnny's lawsuit have been?
There's multiple defenses available in South African law for defamation. The first is truth and public comment. Those two goes hand in hand.
Okay, tell me more.
You can defend yourself against a defamatory statement if you can prove that that statement is not only true, but also that it is in the public interest for those statements to have been made. The public there must be some sort of advantage to the public knowing what's going on.
And I think that's where a lot of people loses their defense now, because they don't necessarily have that part where it is in the public interest for this truth to come out.
Yes.
So do you think in South Africa it would have been in public interest for Johnny, for the people to know?
It could be if she could have proven that it was the truth, first of all. A major issue we must remember in this case is that a lot of her statements seem to have actually been false. But let's say, for example, she could have proven it was true and she said that it was in the public interest. She could have argued that Johnny Depp is a well-known public figure and he's a role model to a lot of people,
a lot
even
of people
young people and
him,
children. Exactly, and it would have been in the public interest for people to know who he really is or what type of person he really is.
So what happens now if she doesn't pay the amount that she has to pay? Because I saw somewhere that she's planning to appeal now.
Yes, so first of all, I think it's important to mention that the jury did award her, Johnny Depp, 10 million rand in what they call compensatory damages and 5 million rand in what they call punitive damages. An important thing is that the judge did reduce the punitive damages of 5 million rand to the statutory limit of 350,000.
Okay, so it's not the actual headlines that he won the case and got the 15 million.
So technically he's only supposed to get 10.35 million. And of course he needs to pay her 2 million as well for her compensatory damages. So in effect he needs to get 8.3 million rand at the end of the day. Yes.
Okay, it's good that you qualified because the headlines obviously don't do that.
Yes.
So tell me now quickly about this appeal process. If she wants to appeal this, what do you think the chances of success would be?
It's interesting because typically with an appeal we have a jury system. The juries don't have to give reasons for why they came to a conclusion. Whereas if it was a trial before a judge, the judge would have to give reasons and make a finding on the credibility of each witness and etc. etc.
Mm-hmm.
On appeal, if there's reasons from a judge, the Court of Appeal can read those reasons, examine the evidence and decide whether there was a fault in the reasoning of the judge. But because the jury don't have to give reasons for how they came to their decision, it's very difficult for a court on appeal to decide whether they were right or wrong. So I suspect her chances of success on appeal might not be as high as she would hope.
Okay, that is quite interesting.
Yes.
That is quite interesting. And in South Africa, how would that appeal work?
In South Africa, you can appeal all the way up until the Constitutional Court if you have a constitutional issue that is being addressed. You have to apply for leave to appeal first in most instances. But remember, all our trials are before a judge in South Africa, and there would be reasons. And there's a record that gets filed with the appeal court, and they will read through the record which contains all the evidence and read through the judgment, and they can then decide whether the judge in the trial correctly interpreted the evidence and correctly interpreted the law and applied it to the evidence. So in that respect, I would say an appeal is a bit easier, if we could put it that way.
Yes,
there's some reason.
It makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the worst thing about this whole saga, as they refer to it now, is the fact that many women that find themselves in similar positions might now be deterred from actually, laying a domestic violence charge and coming out with the truth at the end of the day. In this regard, we have many podcasts, and there'll be a link in the description below this video that you can follow to actually go and get some advice on domestic violence recourses that you might have if you find yourself in a similar position.
Yes, and I think an important message, the other side of the coin, is that there's been a lot of allegations against high-profile men, specifically in recent years with the whole Me Too movement of domestic violence or sexual abuse, etc., etc. Some of them might be guilty, some of them might be really innocent. So it's important, I think the message that we put out there is that men, if you are innocent, you also have recourse.
Definitely.
One of which would be a defamation suit against someone. So men definitely also have the same recourse. course.
No, I agree completely. Okay, that's all from us for today. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time when the appeal outcome is at hand. We'll do a brief discussion of that.
Yes.